Hey there, everyone. This is Car Ray Rob.
Where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob. And we want to welcome you to our podcast, Say Hello to My Little Film.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
That's right, everybody. We are back with another episode of Say Hello to My Little Film.
That's right. This is the podcast where Ray and I take turns recommending movies that we love to the other to see if the other feels the same way that we do.
I do not, Rob, want this to be the month where everything crashes and burns and you recommend a movie that I dislike. We're on a nice little streak here. We need to keep it going.
That's true. This is not the first time it would have happened, though, this
True.
year. So I am trying to keep that streak alive. And I think I'm going to be able to do it. As everybody has gathered, it is my month. And it is also a prideful month.
That's true.
It is Pride Month here in June. And I have something that I am very excited to show you with an actress that I know you love.
I love when I love actresses in movies that I might love upon finding out. So this is topical.
It's topical. It's a cult classic.
Ooh.
So that is also very fun.
Okay, well, I like cult classics. I love actresses that I already love. So, Rob, tell me, what do you got?
What do you got? What do you got?
All right, Ray, what I've got for you this month is the cult satirical teen comedy, But I'm a Cheerleader.
But you're a podcaster.
But I'm also a cheerleader.
Okay, sure.
I can be more than one thing, Ray, and that's the point of this movie.
Oh.
Exactly. It's a movie about, not necessarily fitting into whatever stereotypical box that people think that you are.
Oh, that's cool.
It is. And it stars Natasha Lyonne.
Oh, I do love Natasha Lyonne. That was a perfect setup.
Absolutely.
She is awesome.
And we are obviously big fans of hers here. And this is a great movie because it is kind of taking down the whole idea of, and this is a heavy topic, of conversion therapy. So she plays a cheerleader.
Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, nope, go ahead.
Yeah, how old is the movie?
It came out in 1999.
Okay, yeah.
So this is the 26th anniversary, I guess you would, of But I'm a Cheerleader. So yes, Natasha Lyonne plays a cheerleader whose parents is kind of freak out when they kind of believe that she is
very
a lesbian.
90s parents.
Right, exactly. They freak out when they find out that she is a lesbian or believe that she's a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And they send her to a camp to fix her.
Oh, I get it.
If you will. Yes, exactly. And but the funny thing is she doesn't really think of herself that way either as a lesbian until she kind of gets to this camp and kind of sees the culture around her. But it's got a great supporting cast. Clea Duvall is in it. Melanie Lynskey, who we love from YELLOWJACKETS, is in this. RuPaul,
of course.
is
That's
in
perfect.
this, absolutely. Cathy Moriarty is also in it, who I'm a big fan of.
Sure.
I love her in SOAPDISH.
Yeah. Can we watch SOAPDISH on an episode somehow?
You know what? I think we're going to make that happen just for fun. But yeah, this is a great movie. Like I said, it's a cult classic. It wasn't necessarily well received at the time. I think it's only got like a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, we've proven Rotten Tomato scores many times on this podcast do not hold up.
Kick it out the door. It doesn't matter. This is a movie that I love. It's a lot of fun. It's campy. It's kind of crazy at times, but I think it's a movie you're really going to enjoy.
Well, then I want to go enjoy it. This is the part of the podcast where we invite everybody who's not seen But I'm a Cheerleader to pause the podcast, go check out the movie. When you're done, unpause the podcast, come back and hear what me and Rob have to say about it.
Ray and Rob are currently watching the film. You may be also watching the film. If you're not, then you're listening to me say that Ray and Rob are watching the film. They'll be right back when they're done watching the film.
Rob, you sandbagging SOB. You didn't tell me Rufio was in this.
I didn't want to spoil that surprise.
Rufio.
Rufio.
Oh my
That is
gosh,
true.
that's very dangerous to tell
Dante
me he's not in the
Basco.
movie.
Yep.
That's awesome. I love seeing Rufio and stuff other than Hook.
I know, and it especially this era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was like he was hot for like a hot minute. You know, because he was in obviously he was in Hook. He was in one of the Surf Ninjas.
Oh yes.
And there was a couple other movies like that, and then I felt like he kind of disappeared, but he was in But I'm a Cheerleader.
Well, we got him here. That's awesome.
A lot of great people in this movie, though.
Yeah. Michelle Williams, a young Michelle Williams.
Right, like for a hot minute, she's in there right at the
big
beginning.
in the first act. Yep.
Yeah, Mink Stoll, who is a John Waters regular.
Is she?
Yep, she was the mom.
Yeah. Okay.
Natasha Lyonne's mom. Who was her dad, though? All right. Who was her dad?
Who's Natasha Lyonne's
Yeah,
dad?
who was Natasha Lyonne's dad
Some
in this?
bald guy?
It was Bud Cort, better known as Harold from
Harold and Maude? Oh my gosh. 25 years later?
Yeah.
Wow, I did not. Nope. I mean,
he did not age well.
well, bald is beautiful, but he definitely is
That's
not
just that.
he's not recognizable, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
No, but it's so
I did not see that. I watched his scenes, paid attention to him. He did a great job, but I did not connect him as Harold.
Yeah. So Richard Mole, obviously, he was also in this movie. Bull from Night Court.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just a lot of really good.
RuPaul.
Supporting character. Obviously, RuPaul. I mentioned that before, but RuPaul in a non-drag role.
Weird. Yeah,
Right?
I thought there was like the big twist. Like when Larry and Lloyd showed up, I thought it was that character was gonna be RuPaul in drag.
Sure,
but
yep.
No, it was two completely different characters.
Absolutely. But it's an interesting movie in that just to kind of shift gears that it is it hit me even more this time maybe than in previous viewings, just like how dark conversion therapy is in reality and like the satire of it in this movie.
Is that something that's really still around, or if we move past that? I mean...
It's funny you mention that because it has been outlawed in certain states, but there is a big push to bring it back, and certain states have decriminalized it, and it is politically right now it is making a comeback, which is scary.
Yeah, I was going to say in some ways it feels like as a society we've moved past where this movie took place in, and that is good. But it also feels like in some ways it's coming back though. So
hardcore.
Put your seatbelt on. But
yeah,
it kind of reminds me when you watch this movie, because like you said, this movie does a really good job of poking fun at conversion therapy in a lot of pretty meaningful ways, I think. But it's kind of a very similar conversation we had when we talked about Death of Stalin, and is satire appropriate to tackle something that's really actually horrible, but kind of you make light of in a movie like this?
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. It's a case-by-case basis. Obviously, with something like Death of Stalin, it worked. I'm sure there's other cases where
Jojo Rabbit is another situation where it works, but you're talking about Hitler.
Yeah, and I mentioned Mink Stoll. She was an original Dreamlander for John Waters, and it's undeniable that But I'm a Cheerleader is inspired by the work of John Waters. I mean, it's undeniable, and obviously John Waters made a career out of that.
Yeah.
Kind of taking things to those places, and tackling sometimes darker material, just kind of fitting into that, spectrum of satire. So
right.
we watched Pink Flamingos, which was your favorite movie that year.
Totally.
But it's the same kind of thing where it's like it is kind of that satire. But it took it, like I said, to that just a really extreme place when then you move to something like Death of Stalin, and it's more, I'll use the word palatable, probably on a wider scale. But as we tackled with Pink Flamingos, sometimes that extreme can turn people off, whereas something like Death of Stalin and, in my opinion, But I'm a Cheerleader, it can maybe bridge that gap a little bit and bring more people into the conversation.
Yeah, that's what I think. It is exposure to the material, and I don't feel like you're going to walk away from this movie being like, oh, conversion therapy is okay. It was kind of looked fun,
right?
It's not, and and doesn't work and it's not really needed and stuff. But either way, I think the movie does a good job of tackling it too. But I do think it's important to understand and to have that conversation about the satirical nature of it and kind of understanding the tool and how the tool is being used.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that, I'd mentioned in the before section, that the movie was kind of panned a little bit critically when it first came out. And one of the things that people really kind of pointed out was the stereotypes.
Sure.
And the use of them, and like how it seemed like certain characters were really just boiled down to stereotypes. And I think at first glance, I can see where you're coming from. But I think ultimately that's missing the point. Just because I think the stereotypes are part of the point. It's, again, part of satire, when
Sure.
you're really trying to kind of take everything down to this kind of comedic place, if
Right.
you will. And really kind of like what we kind of talked about with Pink Flamingos, where it was almost like, in my mind, like kind of like a horror movie for conservative Christians. It's kind of like that here, where
Yeah.
it's like, that you're stereotyping how people see you, because a lot of this movie is about you not fitting into a box.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think I think they use stereotypes also to, like, they're making fun of, like, you for projecting those stereotypes on people. They're not really making fun of the characters. It's like, like when they have that intervention scene for Natasha Lyonne's character Megan, and they're having this intervention because she's a vegetarian.
Right.
Because
She likes Melissa Etheridge.
Yeah, she likes Melissa. She has vaginal drawings or vaginal orientated
Right.
drawings. It's like a picture
Women
of a
and
rose.
girls
Yeah.
in her locker,
Yeah, a picture
instead of guys.
Yeah, so it's like, but they're not making fun of They're not making fun of Megan, the gay character. They're making fun of everybody who's projecting those stereotypes on her.
Right.
So I think it's like, yes, they use stereotype, but I think they're using it differently than you realize. You know what I mean? If you're the one that complains about it.
Well,
honestly.
absolutely. Like, everybody in that room that is, set up this intervention is trying to put Megan into a box. Like, this is what it means to be a lesbian.
Right.
This, because you have all of these things, they make you a lesbian. And they actually tackle that later in the movie with the Jan character, who they think is a lesbian. The short hair, has like the mustache coming in,
Yeah.
and she's like, I'm not a lesbian. I don't like
And
girls.
nobody will believe
like,
her.
I just want a wiener. And
Yeah.
like, nobody believes her.
No,
And-
you're lying.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I do think they play with that more than maybe people at the time gave them credit for. But it has had a critical reevaluation since then. So, to be fair.
Yeah. I do think, society was very different in '99 than it is for the most part
Definitely.
now. So it is hard to date the movie in some of those ways. And so, in some of the ways this movie does feel like its own place in time. Like, this is a '90s movie, like gay movie, I guess. I don't know if
Definitely.
that's the right way to frame the movie, but
Right.
because I think is very different than a 2015, like 2000
Right.
gay movie, where it's like being open wasn't like really, like, it was a scary transition, like
Mhm.
to come out back in the '90s. Like,
Yeah.
you might be kicked out of your house, which these characters basically were.
Yeah.
So there isn't a lot of resolution too, but
Right.
essentially they're kicked out of their house and they don't go back. Like, there isn't, like, it's not like, oh, okay, well, twist, the parents are accepting at the end of the movie. That doesn't happen here, and it didn't really happen a lot in the '90s.
Right. No, absolutely.
So it's it's important to tackle that.
But you bring up a good point. Just a movie like this being accepted then compared to now. Jamie Babbitt, the writer director, she had to fight for the rating, because when the movie first came out, they wanted to give it an NC-17 rating because
Girls kissing.
homosexual
Yeah.
depictions were rated much harsher at the time than they would be now.
Mm-hmm.
So, while you watch this movie, and for the most part, it's not benign, but definitely not, anything too crazy compared to, other movies.
It's
But
just
at the
kissing,
time,
I mean.
right? For the most part, yeah. There's some like masturbation stuff, a
Yeah.
little bit here and there, and
Well, masturbating's not gay, Rob.
well, no, I understand, but fair. But I'm just saying, yeah, that's fair. Absolutely, 100%. I get it, yeah. But but even some of like the interactions, like the touching interactions and stuff like that between the two characters, that was part of the stuff that she had to fight to not have rated the way
Yeah,
that it
the
was
most
rated.
grotesque kissing is between Natasha Lyonne and her boyfriend, like at the beginning of
Right.
the movie. Because
Right. Oh my God.
he's just such a bad kisser.
Oh,
And she's not into it. It's very awkward.
Right. That was it was obviously supposed to be comically bad. Like that
Yes,
was
and it is.
yeah,
It
this is
is.
comically bad. But man, so uh, I think but some of the stuff that they really do to bring that up, some of the visual stuff that they kind of do in this movie is so good, and it's subtle stuff. You mentioned the lock, the intervention before the intervention. So you have the kissing scene, and then uh, one of the things that I stuck out to me, and I just again, it's a great just subtle visual is the tale, what I call the tale of two lockers.
Yeah.
So, you have Michelle Williams' locker open and it's got guys, top to bottom.
Right.
And then Megan walks up, opens up her locker, and it, as the interview said earlier in the intervention, it's polar opposite,
Right.
girls everywhere. And it's just super funny how, they were able to get so much across again, like so quickly with visuals like that. And
Yeah.
I think throughout the whole movie, it was like that and really smart.
I think I liked a part of how they played Megan's character too, because yeah, she had those pictures in her locker, and yes, she is a vegetarian, and everything that the intervention kind of talked about was true, but and she was a lesbian, but she didn't actually know it yet at that point. Like she didn't connect the dots. So
Right.
I do kind of like how the movie kind of pushes her toward that revelation,
Definitely.
and you kind of see that whole process.
Well, absolutely. And especially, coming from what's clearly a very conservative evangelical Christian household,
Yeah.
which, seeing Mink Stoll as an evangelical Christian is always
Mm.
amazing. But, just knowing where she came from. But, I would have to, it's that kind of bred in repression.
Right.
And I think that's,
And
it tackles that really well
Yeah,
in this movie.
and again, it's very timely again of the '90s, where you wouldn't put it past a character like Megan to not realize it, to think about, can I be anything other than straight, because you just weren't programmed that way, you weren't exposed to it, so she could just be confused and just not think she was maybe as sexually active as her friends, whatever, but
Right.
not realize that she was
Right.
in fact a lesbian.
Yeah. Well, and obviously it goes into overdrive once the intervention actually happens and she goes to True Directions.
Yeah.
And but the visual of RuPaul kind of getting out of the van or whatever with that "Straight is Great" T-shirt
Yeah.
on, it's just as soon as you see that, you kind of know where it's going, and
Yeah.
it's so.
I know. I feel like we're
funny.
talking about the movie as if it's a really heavy movie, but it's not. It's a very
Right.
It's a very light movie, which is very enjoyable, and was the reason why we were talking about the satire that kind of tackled it so lightly, because it is a really funny movie.
Right, exactly. So, once they get to True Directions, then you meet Cathy Moriarty's character, who
Yeah,
she's
she's
just
always
great in
great.
everything.
She's
I
just
mean, just everything.
Talk about knowing who you
Oh,
are and be
my
able just to
God.
act the heck out of what you are.
Seriously, I love Cathy Moriarty in everything. It doesn't matter how big the role is. It doesn't how small the role is. She is always so memorable. I mean, whether it's SOAPDISH or Matinee or Casper, Kindergarten
Yeah.
Cop. I mean, it's just
I think
on and on.
SOAPDISH is my highest level best Cathy Moriarty movie, but
Yeah.
she's really great in everything.
Yeah, and from what I understand, she's actually a sweetheart of a person.
I'm sure
she's an activist.
When you have a deep
She's
voice,
right,
yeah,
right.
you're just gonna be you're just gonna come off as evil.
Right. Well, again, she's an activist, and she's an autism activist. I think she does activism for LGBTQ rights and issues and stuff like that. So it's just, again, she's so amazing. But obviously, she typically does play that villainous character, and she does it so well
Yeah.
in this movie.
Yeah, she does. She's just she knocks it out of the park. And I think when they get to the conversion camp or house or however
Yeah.
you want to describe it, but
Either way.
it's really funny because, and again, it's poking fun at this conversion therapy notion, but it's nothing that she does at this camp would be successful in not turning the people either
Right.
They're turning them straight. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Like, you think this is gonna
everything is
work?
very
Right.
sexually erotic in some way, and it's like
Yeah.
it's turning the kids on more than it's turning them off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's funny how they kind of use that, like, these are manly things and this is what you should do, and then they make it look like it's not. It's just sexually weird. And so
Right.
it's funny to kind of, these things that we would associate with just being manly or not.
Well, yeah, and obviously even those kinds of things become the stereotype. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's almost
Playing
poking
football,
fun. Right.
working on a car,
Right, chopping wood, doing those types of things, like everything. Right, that there's like or typical traditional gender roles, and
wearing traditional gender, like blues only for the boys,
Right.
pinks only for the girls.
Exactly, and I found it interesting how when she gets there and they go to the step one, admitting you're a homosexual. In that scene, it almost comes down to coercion in a way. Like they almost coerce her into saying that she's a homosexual. Now she is a lesbian, obviously. By the end of the movie, it is very, she is. But it's like it's interesting how they almost coerced her, with terms like phrases like you think that's normal. It's really easy to be prude when you aren't attracted to him,
right?
Which obviously leads her to say, "But I'm a cheerleader."
Right.
It's that thing where it's like that box that she's made for herself already, and it's like, okay, well, this is where I live. I am a cheerleader, so I can't be anything else outside of that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting, like I said, stereotypes on the other side of that, for the straight characters, like who's supposed to be straight and who's not.
Right. Yeah. I think the movie does a good job of like letting you know that most of them realize like we're just trying to get out of here through faking it, not actually believing what we're doing. So just say it, or just do this, or just pretend that. Like, I think Graham's character, like, even at one point says it. We're just trying to, she's just trying to pretend well enough to get out of here.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what I think is I think that's what they're saying about conversion therapy is people that passed it were just pretending or just burying something.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting topic to think about because they don't I will say about the movie, like they don't resolve a lot of the B characters.
Sure.
And everybody that stayed, I guess, kind of passed.
Right.
Like, I can't remember the character's name, but he kind of played the Jewish guy.
Joel.
And then there was Hillary. From The Last of Us. You remember? The girl that played Hillary is the girl that was in Kansas City from The Last of Us.
Oh, yeah, Melanie Lynskey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I think of her. Yes, I always forget they did that in Last of Us. But yeah, I always think of her, obviously from YELLOWJACKETS.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Melanie Lynskey. I love them.
Yeah, but anyway, so their characters, I don't feel like they, the conversion therapy was successful for them in any way.
No,
but they graduated, and you don't really know what they're going to do next, kind of thing. But I think that's what the movie was saying was they're going to pass, but they're just faking it, or it's not really working. They're just pleasing the teacher.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's just kind of like these rules that are set up. I think about, so obviously the Cathy Moriarty character has a son, Rock, who is also kind of part of this as well, who's clearly gay. And he's like, part of this as well.
He sips and he doesn't chug.
Right, exactly. Oh my God, yeah, the no more sipping.
Chug it like a man.
Right, she's got like this squiggly straw. But you know what's funny about that is I kid you not, there is crap on Fox News today. Jesse Waters talks about crap like that all the time, like real men don't use straws. Oh. And I'm just like,
something's never changed,
right? Like, so it's like satirical as it was then. That crap is happening now. So
that's what we talked about before. Is satire dead?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, yes. I mean, it is dead as a doornail because this crap has come true. I mean, it's ridiculous, and I think that is, again, kind of a prescience for this movie, maybe, because another thing about this, and this getting into step 2, was gender identity, which I think is interesting because I feel like a lot of people, because that conversation is kind of happening now in a lot of places, it feels like it's something that's new. You know what I mean? And it's something but it's not. It's something that's always been there. And I think it's, a movie like this totally proves that point.
Yeah,
This conversation was being had 25 years ago.
26 years
26
ago.
years ago
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I think I kind of wrote a very similar note where I was like, when I saw that step 2, it's got its own little, space in the movie where you just read those words. I was like, oh, so gender identity is not something that was invented in the last 3 years?
Right.
I thought that was funny.
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to that whole spectrum thing. And what I mentioned earlier about the Jan character, who kind of came out as straight
Right.
at one point. But it's like,
her parents sent her there for being gay, and she was never
right.
gay. Nobody would believe her.
Right. And it just, like, gender is a spectrum. That is the point. Like,
Yeah.
and that character shows how that works,
Right.
And it, yeah, like I said, I think so. That's something about this movie that obviously at the time, going back to reviews and contemporary criticisms of it, that's something that time won out on. You know what I mean? Like, this was saying way more at the time than what I think anybody realized.
I think another thing that it talks a lot about that I found really interesting is this, like, I guess we would just think of it now as like this nature versus nurture, and in regards to being a homosexual, and the movie and these conversion therapists is definitely like there's a reason this happened to you. You got turned into this. You caught this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's when in the movie they call them the roots, and they're like, they're all trying to find a good root, which really is like the good lie to tell the teacher for them to buy. Because once she buys into why this happened to you, she'll pretend to find a diagnosis to fix it.
Right.
Right.
100%.
And it's funny how they like blame Graham's gay because her mom wore pants at her wedding.
Right.
Like, and then I really thought the scene was interesting when they were finding Megan's root with her parents there, and she was like, was it her dad was like unemployed?
Yeah.
So her mom had to work,
and it was like, you have no respect for men because you don't respect your father. Your father was demasculated and all that.
Right.
I'm just like,
and
yeah.
Megan's like, no, I'm not saying that.
Right.
But Megan's kind of bought into this at first. This
right.
trying to find out. In her own self, why she's this way. And again, you when you're young, you do look to people to seem like they know the answers, or at least pretend they do. So you're like, are you right? Like, is this what? I'm not sure why this is happening. Maybe she's right. And then you look back and when you watch that scene, you can see it's clearly just BS. But
right.
Because I think it's not nature. It's not nurture. It's not one thing turns you into this. It's nature. It's how you were born.
Who you were born.
It's who you are.
To be. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of a great arc, really, for Megan and Graham, like the two main, who I would call the main characters. Like you said, a lot of the B characters don't have any that have the resolution. At least these two characters have. A couple others, but Megan does buy into it when she gets there. She's trying to be her, who she thinks she's supposed to be, which is what she's been doing since before she got there.
Right.
Because that's the habit she needed to break. Needed to break, like, stop being who people are telling her she's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Instead of who she actually is. However, there is a lot of left of her by the end. Because it's, again, this kind of stereotype of, what a lesbian is or does or looks like or whatever. And so you think, oh, well, I'm a cheerleader, so I can't be this. And by the end, she's still a cheerleader. Exactly. You know what I mean? But she's open about who she is otherwise. And Graham...
Well, you can be both, right? I think that's what the movie's saying.
Right,
like,
exactly.
They're not mutually exclusive.
100%. And then Graham is kind of this situation where she comes in and she almost, maybe not, doesn't look down on Megan at first, but it is kind of like, oh, look, this kind of like prudish, goody-goody two-shoes kind of thing. Like, oh, she even says at like one point, like, even after they're kind of together, and like, oh, the jocks and the bulimic cheerleader, and like stops herself and like she, oh, you can say it, cheerleader, So Graham also has to become accepting to a certain degree herself.
Sure.
And she even says like, oh, maybe I'm just scared because I don't love something as much as you love cheer, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I do think there's a really deep storylines for both of those characters in that regard, trying to discover who they are and how they can accept themselves and everyone around them.
I will say I like what the movie was doing at the end, like saying when Natasha Lyonne's character came out in her cheerleading outfit, but to have the winning speech to win over Megan be that 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of cheer is very anticlimactic. Like, this cheer is horrible. This is not good. There's no cleverness into it. You're just rhyming words with 4 and 8. So I'm like, this wouldn't have worked for me to win me over for somebody, but I get the themes, and I think it works in that way.
Wow, Mr. Judgy over there.
I'm sorry, it's just like
Mr.
the most
Judgy.
basic. Like a
Yeah.
4-year-old could have wrote that, but
But it's, you know,
thematically, it's doing something, but it's just verbally, it sounds horrible.
right. Well, and obviously, you know, they get to a point in the movie where they need some kind of ally. And I think this is kind of, you know, another message that people can kind of take away from this is like, how do you become an ally? And you know, obviously being trapped in the house with Cathy Moriarty and the whole system and everything being trapped, and you know, but then they meet Larry and Lloyd,
Yeah.
who are ex-true directioners who now kind of
XX gays.
right, the XX gays. And you know, they're the funny thing is I really respect these characters because it's like they're just trying to show them that they can be whoever they want to be. You know, they're not trying to put them in another box, because that's another trap that people can fall into. It's like, well, you have to fit this mold. Like, well, even if you are gay, you have to fit this mold.
Right.
And I never got that from the Larry and Lloyd character. It's just they wanted to give them options.
Exactly, because a lot of these kids are there because they don't have options. They can't go home, most
Right.
of them, if they don't pass this. Like, their parents will not be accepting. And so they have to fall into the trap of doing whatever the conversion therapists say, because this is their only way to go back to live under a roof. But Larry and Lloyd give them an alternative. Larry and Lloyd say, you can come here,
Right.
you can live with us,
Yep.
be yourself,
Yep.
and if that means you get kicked out of your house, you're still going to have shelter because you can live with us. And it's, yeah, you said that. I mean, that's an important role in their lives. And I think that was a turning point for Megan, that she needed somewhere to go
Yeah.
if it wasn't going to work out at home.
Yeah. And obviously she gets kicked out, and then she ends up there, that's
Yeah.
where Dolph, the Rufio Dante Basco, ends
Who
up.
was kicked out earlier.
Right, who was kicked out earlier in the movie, ends up there as well. And those scenes are great. I think.
Yeah,
you
they
know,
were.
with Megan and Dolph in the bedroom at Larry and Lloyd's, kind of talking, and then like when they go out dancing, you know, she's obviously, you know, at this point Megan is obviously hurt because Graham still feels that familial pressure, which is an interesting twist
Yeah,
for her.
her dad was a real jerk.
Oh, he's a real jerk. But it's just, you know, with a character like Graham, it's like she's the rebel. You're like, oh, she's the rebel.
Right.
She's gonna stick it to the man no matter what. But like, and she doesn't. You know,
No.
she gives in and does what she needs to do to stay in the program and graduate, because in the end, she's still kind of afraid of her parents in
Definitely.
that way.
They were afraid of the
it-
rejection of her parents.
right?
Yeah.
Which is a big problem, you know, and
Huge.
it's a huge thing that people have to overcome, you know, if they are going to come out and, you know, live their life. I mean, that the repercussions from that are real, you know, and you can say like, oh, you should just do it and live your like. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm saying it's not an easy choice to make,
Sure.
especially when you finally have to do it. And obviously, I
Yeah.
think you should do it, but how you do it is very personal, and it's something that really needs to be, you know,
Yeah.
taken into consideration.
Yeah, I definitely think they explore that with Graham. It's, you know,
Yeah.
and I kind of said, like, you know, when she does finally choose to follow Megan, to like embrace who she is, you know, they jump in the truck, they drive off, and we don't really know where they're going to drive off to. We don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they're going to stay at Larry and Lloyd's for a while and see if they're going to make this work. But you know, it's not really about the future for them. It's just about that they got to this point together, I guess, and that's kind of how the movie, you know, wraps it up for them.
Well, yeah. I mean, for Graham, she's leaving the program. Obviously, she ran away. Like, she doesn't care what her parents think. She's, like you said, not going to have probably anywhere else to go. So she probably ended up at Larry and
Yeah.
Lloyd's, you know. But you know, luckily, Megan's parents, obviously, they in the little credit scene that shows they go to the PFLAG meeting. So that's a big thing, you know, where, you know, so they are accepting their daughter, at least to a certain degree. But you know, it's like we've said, it's their dark themes.
Yeah.
You know, everything we've just been talking about is can be in reality an extremely dark experience for people.
Yeah, I mean, it is heavy, and I could see this movie, you know, being controversial when it came out, but also probably potentially very helpful.
Yeah. Oh man, I have seen over the years, you know, working in film and stuff like that. I have met so many people who have come up to me, or like when this movie comes up, they say this movie, you know, it may not have been the thing that made them come out, but it was a bedrock
That's
part of the way of helping them discover who they are and who they are supposed to be, and help them get to that point where they could come out. So, for something that was, critically bashed at the time, I know plenty of people who this movie absolutely helped.
And then what better reason to make a movie? Like, how could you not feel like you made something, really precious to the zeitgeist when you have stories like that?
Right. Well, and like I said, it has gotten a bit of a reevaluation. I think.
Well, it just comes across much more mild nowadays than probably what it did in 1999.
Definitely, and I think I saw like one thing is like one of the top 5. A list I saw was like the best LGBTQ movies ever made or whatever. So again, reevaluations, and obviously the LGBTQ publications probably see it differently.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Than traditional Roger Ebert's or whatever.
Yeah.
Even though he had, I looked it up, he actually had not terrible things to say. He says it feels like an amateur night version of itself, awkward, heartfelt, and sweet.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that's maybe he's referring to as amateur-y. I think it's stuff that's on purpose. Like
Definitely.
like the bright colors, sometimes there's the quick cuts or the close-ups. I just think it's on purpose. I think that was the storytelling they were going for.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I will go back to what I said before. This is 100% inspired by John Waters.
Right.
And Jamie Babbitt wanted to make her John Waters movie, and this was it. And like I said, I think ultimately in the end she won. I will say I think Jamie Babbitt won on the quality meter. But now that we've gotten pretty much through the whole movie, it's a brisk 90-minute movie, so it's not super long. And I think we've touched on all of probably the most important parts. But the most important part for our podcast is, Ray, did you like But I'm a Cheerleader, and would you recommend it?
I did like
Woo!
But I'm a Cheerleader.
There we go. He's going to cheer about this movie forever.
Yeah, I mean, I love Natasha Lyonne, so I'm not.
Yes.
I don't know how this movie has slipped by me for 26 years. First
Sure.
of all, but yeah, like I said, I think for a lot of the reasons we've tackled, it's ability to handle some heavy topics that I think in this podcast we've made sound heavy or brought to light how heavy they actually were, but to handle it in that comedic way where you can expose this content to the larger audience, I think is really good and really important, and it's very digestible. Like again, the movie, like you said, maybe they had a fight for ratings back then, but now it feels like it's nothing but kissing. Like it's so it's like it's not trying to shock you. It's not there's nothing that's trying to like make you feel uncomfortable. It's like you really see these two characters who are genuinely falling in love with each other.
Yeah.
And and the movie is funny. Like the stuff it tries to be funny is funny.
Yeah.
The stereotypes that it uses for comedic effect are effective. Like I think this movie knows exactly what it wants to be and what it wants to accomplish. And you just told us stories of how I think it accomplished that by, showing people that they have options,
right?
And
Voice
how they
to
come
the
out.
voiceless.
Yes, exactly. Great way to say it. So yeah, for all those reasons, and just like I said, at the end of the day, it's a fun movie. Like you're going to enjoy the movie watching experience. You're going to understand what it has to say, and it's for some people it's going to speak to them at a much higher level than that. So like I think when you can check that many boxes, yes, I'm going to enjoy the movie experience, and yes, I'm going to recommend it to others to watch.
All right, I'm super stoked that you like this movie. I hope everybody else did as well. If you needed to see this movie, I'm even more stoked that you actually got to watch this movie. And, if you watch this movie and you realize somebody that might be in a situation like this, the best thing you can do is be an ear to listen, a shoulder to cry on. Be there when that person needs you. Be a true ally. And this month, that's one thing that Ray and I really wanted to highlight, is just being a great ally. And I think this movie does a great job of doing that. Like I said, the Larry and Lloyd characters, it's a great example of just showing that there's not one way to live. There's a lot of ways to live. And Ray and I want everybody to hear that message that needs to. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed But I'm a Cheerleader. But before we go, Ray, we got to know, have you been watching anything else you liked?
A lot of stuff, actually.
A lot of stuff. This is going to be a long conversation. I kind of do too.
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff we watched, not together, but I know we've been talking about as these seasons of actually good TV, for the most part, is wrapped up. But a couple that I watched individually, I watched Seth Rogen's new show on Apple TV Plus, The Studio.
Oh, sure.
It was great.
Okay.
Definitely suggest people check that out. It's, he's the head of a studio and just kind of like they can kind of have this meta poking fun look at Hollywood a lot. It's one of those shows where like throughout the episodes, like things get worse and worse and worse before they finally get better. One of those type of deals, but it's done really well. They do some different things, like one episode might be a runner, one episode might be more like a noir. So like they also use different genres of Hollywood within their episodes. Not all of them, but for the most part.
Yeah.
So it's tackling a lot of different things at once. Great cast. It's really legitimately funny, which I think is hard nowadays.
Sure.
So really great watch. Hacks season 4. I'm a huge fan of Hacks. I think I've talked about Hacks season 3 when we first started this podcast, and now I'm talking about Hacks season 4. Great show. It's a show that like balances this thing with these two lead characters where like I find that I at times hate them and love them equally. Like the way that they can balance that is so magical to me. The way they just manipulate you into hating these characters and then giving them real quick redemptions, because the characters hate each other and love each other, and that is literally how you feel about them for the most part. So really good. I also think I said this when season 3 wrapped up. Show does a really good job of at the end of every season like not resetting the characters, but putting them in a little bit different position where their interactions with each other are just naturally going to have to be different. So many shows, I think, struggle with like making it always feel new, and this show doesn't. And I think they've done it again with season 4. I think they've given themselves enough leeway to kind of keep it still fun and engaging and not feel like it's out of runway. But then some of the big heavy hitters that we've watched together. Andor season 2. I am just such a huge fan of Andor season.
Huge fan.
Yeah, Andor season 1 is probably one of my top 5 like seasons of TV. Not sure. If I just break it down as a season,
I can agree with that.
I love it. I rewatched it as a build up to season 2, and I thought season 2 was really, really good. I thought it started a little slow for me, but maybe because I just had that build up in my mind. But I think it crushed the ending.
Yeah, the three episode chunks that they did it in, I think, was simultaneously effective, but did slow down the pacing a little bit, since it was like each one was a year, quote unquote, like between each one. So, but I think they're all 3, or I guess it was four 3-episode chunks. That was 12 total, right?
I think what was the last one only 2? The drive to Rogue One, or I can't remember.
I think it was 3.
Okay,
they were all 3.
Do the math.
So I think it's 12 total. I think they were all just really great encapsulations, like each 3 episodes. So each one built on the previous one. Yeah. And I think they did it in such an effective way that I was able to kind of overlook maybe some of the slower narrative pacing. Yeah. Of especially the first couple of episode drops.
Yeah, their use of character is great. The way they kind of build up this like lead up to Rogue One, and it wasn't just, hey, everybody has to die because we don't know these characters in Rogue One. Some do, but some just go away. They're just like, they just weren't part of it anymore. And this makes sense too. It doesn't feel forced. They do such a good job of not falling into the Star Wars trap of like just making people show up or just try to fit.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, no lightsabers.
Even though Darth Vader was in Rogue One, the movie, he did not need to be in the show, and he was not in the show.
I don't even think there was any force using or anything like that. This is literally life under a fascist empire and what it's like and how you could potentially try to stop it.
Yeah, super interesting
I think if you don't like Star Wars or knew nothing about Star Wars, you could still watch Andor and really enjoy it.
Absolutely. I don't think you have to be a Star Wars fan at all.
I also watched Pee-wee as himself.
I did that.
Okay, Paul Rubens doc.
I did too.
Was also really great.
Oh my god. This last 15 minutes wrecked me. Oh my god.
A lot of it I did not know.
Yeah.
I did not know about Paul Rubens, so I found it very, very interesting, but definitely a nostalgic trip down memory lane, seeing the behind-the-scenes stuff. I'm a huge Doc fan anyway, so this was like easy layup for me.
Oh, yeah. I've been a Pee-wee fan ever since the heyday of Pee-wee in the 80s, so like that was, through the ups and the downs of Paul Rubens, I've always really loved Paul Rubens, and yeah, this just made me love him even more. But he was a complicated guy, and I think that's really what the documentary was able to explore. Was, he wasn't necessarily the easiest guy to deal with at times, but he was also went through hell multiple times for almost no reason.
And really I think because of his early passing, they don't get to really explore that as much, or maybe he just didn't want to go into some of the reasons about why some of this stuff happened, because we know the original theater incident, there was a little bit more background to that they could have dove into to kind of clear his name a bit, but they don't really.
And in his second arrest, when it was the obscene, when he ended up charging or pleading down for the obscene materials because he had the early like homoerotic pornography stuff.
It wasn't really even
pornographic. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't really. No, it wasn't. But I guess by their standards, it was. But I think part of that was because at that time he wasn't ready to come out of the closet, and he knew that if that went to trial, he was going to be forced to. Yeah. It was gonna have to come out. And so I think at that point, that's why he did the plead down. But I think I've told you this before, but the original theater incident, it's been a while since I've read it, but Hunter S. Thompson actually talks about that in his book Kingdom of Fear, going into depth about how really that stemmed from the fact that the local sheriff, who was in the dock, you saw footage of him in the dock, really had it out for the theater owner. And wanted to shut down the theater and wanted to get back at him and all of that. And because of that, he had gotten wind that Paul Rubens was going to be went to this theater. It was basically a setup. They knew it was so. That's in the doc he says like, we didn't know he was Pee Wee. We didn't know who he was. Like, no, they knew exactly who he was. They knew exactly what they was doing and why. And it had nothing to do with Paul Rubens, and it had to do with getting to the theater owner.
Yeah.
At least that's what Hunter S. Thompson said. So who knows?
I trust Hunter S. Thompson. But yeah, that's what I mean. They don't really dive into that much. Like, he just almost wants to just brush it by a little bit. Yeah. Paul Rubens, and just he kind of states his innocence. But he says at one point in the doc, he's like, I don't want to come off like a victim or conspiracy theorist or whatever. So he's just like, it is what it is. Yeah. But I mean, either way, nothing illegal was being done, as he says. But either way, great doc. Just exploring his mindset of a guy who was afraid to come out his whole life, being a kid show host. It's just super interesting, really good. Now, we got to be careful with this next topic.
The big one. We reached the big kahuna.
Yes. Could probably easily do a podcast on this. Let us know in the comments if you want us to. The Last of Us Season 2 wrapped up this week. Yep. So, it's hard for me to judge it. Season 1 was awesome, obviously. Season 1 was amazing.
Season 1 was amazing.
Again, talk about favorite shows of all time for if you rank just as a season. And then Season 2 was naturally always going to be more controversial because the game was naturally more controversial. The game was hated at first when it came out for the choices it made.
Sure.
And basically the shows has made a lot of the same choices. So thus it's going to be disliked in some ways just as equally. So I guess I give the show some credit for doing that. And I'm not saying I disliked it. I'm just saying there was always going to be an uphill battle, especially splitting this into 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to be a little harsher. I think by the end, I will say I liked it.
Yeah.
But barely in certain regards. And full disclosure, Last of Us Part 2 is my favorite video game of all time.
So we're coming with
very high expectations.
Very high expectations.
And there were things that when the season started, certain reveals of information, like about Abby and stuff like that just aren't in the first half of the game. And when they put them in the first half of the season, I was really taken aback and be like, well, why are you doing this? Like, why are you revealing information? But then we figured, like, okay, well, maybe the narrative is going to be a bit different going through the first half. But then when it wasn't, and it just kind of like basically wraps up in a lot of ways how the first half of the game wraps up, I'm like, why did you do this?
Yeah.
Like,
I think they start to show the reasons just a hair toward the end, and I'm like, I think maybe it would work for me if I see the whole thing.
Maybe.
But with just seeing the parts of it that we see right now, it seems like you blew the opportunity for some. Just really, it's just more good. It's more shock value than it is anything.
Well,
like
but it's just
the support of the twist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they just have to make up for those in other ways. But yeah, like I said, I mean, a lot of it is just really adapted from the game. Like it's some things are shot for shot, but because they revealed the information differently, kind of just makes some things feel a little flatter.
Yeah.
But I still think it's really good. It being 7 episodes, I don't know if that was an HBO choice or the show's choice, because they didn't, because the second game is naturally like twice as long as the first season. So,
right.
Like the first game.
Right.
So there's much more content to dive into, and they don't get to like do the side stuff that they did so much in season 1, which was so good, like fleshing out characters well beyond where they were in the game. They don't get to do that in this season because they just don't have the time.
No, yeah.
And so I don't know why they couldn't just do, if you're going to start splitting up in 2 seasons, it's fine, but they should both be 10 episodes so that you can do some of that extra stuff. But,
yeah. Maybe in context of the third season, we'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully it can rebound.
Yeah. All right. So we're spending a lot of time there, but what else have you been watching, Rob? There's 3 things we've had in common, but I know you've had to have watched some other stuff.
Well, yeah. Let's see. Not much else. I'll mention this. I did watch the new Fear Street prom night on Netflix. If you remember the original like trilogy,
Yep.
the Fear Street trilogy, R.L. Stein wrote them, if I'm not mistaken, or they're based on R.L. Stein or something like that. I enjoyed that first trilogy. It was like 3 different horror movies, kind of in 3 different styles, set in 3 different time periods,
Yeah.
but they were all connected. It was interesting the way they did it. This was like completely standalone and really just not
good.
no, it was not good.
Darn.
Yeah, like it. At least the first trilogy, even if you didn't love it, you could still kind of give it credit for trying to do something interesting. This was basically just like a prom night movie all over again, and they've made those.
Nothing
and
special.
Nothing special about it. No great twists or anything. No even interesting character arcs. Nothing.
Darn.
It was really just kind of a crash and burn for me. But we'll see. I think they did have kind of like a little thing in the stinger of the movie that kind of tried to connect it to the original trilogy, so I don't know if they're gonna like try to do
Do a
more
sequel
of that. So if they do that and they're able to rebound, I'll give it credit. But if this is it, no, just not for me.
Well, Rob, I think our conversation on "But I'm a Cheerleader" is wrapped up. But what we want the audience to do is not wrapped up, and there's only one way to ask them, and that's
You're gonna do it.
that's through cheer.
Oh, he's gonna do it.
1, 2, leave us a review. 3, 4, 5, hit subscribe.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, no. If you
Did
leave us a
it.
review, a 5-star review on whatever provider you're listening on, we will read it live on air. We've said that many times, and Rob, we have one.
We have one. I was gonna say we have one.
You have to read it. Who's it from?
This is from Black Hobbit 86 on Apple Podcasts. 5-star review. Podcast for movie lovers. It says, hearing 2 movie lovers who talk about movies with love, but without getting lost in technical mumbo jumbo. Love this podcast.
We
Thank you,
love
Black
to
Hobbit
hear that.
86.
Thank
That
you.
is exactly what we're going for here.
Thank you very much. All right, for everybody else out there who hasn't done that yet, do that so we can read and throw your name out there. Like and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that yet. If you guys would like to talk to me and Rob, reach out to us at carrayrob@gmail.com or hit us up at carrayrob on Blue Sky.
Absolutely. If there is a comment section on whatever platform you're on, by all means, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of But I'm a Cheerleader. Let us know if this movie's touched you or anybody else you know. We'd love to hear stories like that. Also, any movie that Ray and I might need to check out. We are always looking for great stuff to watch. We will be back next week with our second ever episode of A Copy of a Copy. We are going to keep that going. And we are going to be watching the John Waters original Hairspray.
John Waters
Plus,
is everywhere.
With everywhere. Exactly. Keeping this Pride Month going. And as well as the musical remake. So, have you seen either one of those?
I haven't seen either one. I've seen bits and pieces of Hairspray. I remember like the marketing for it a lot, but I've never seen the whole thing.
All right, so I'm going to force Ray to watch another John Waters movie, so you are definitely not going to want to miss that. But then we'll be back in 2 weeks with the next episode of Say Hello to My Little Film, and we'll be back to me. No.
No, it's my turn, Rob.
It will be
don't
you.
Get to
I'm
do
getting
all of
so
these
lost.
movies.
We do so many shows now, I am lost. It will be Ray's episode, and I'm very excited to see what Ray has to offer. I know I'm going to love it. But until then, this is Car Ray Rob.
Where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob. And remember, be defined by the films you love, not the ones you hate.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
All right, everybody, want to set up my next episode of Say Hello to My Little Film. I'm going to be presenting Rob with A Walk in the Woods, the 2015 Robert Redford and Nick Nolte movie about two guys exploring their friendship as they explore the Appalachian Trail. So just a nice, quaint buddy movie, buddy travel movie. So going to try and take it a little easy on Rob and see if I can get him to like it. So check that movie out if you never have, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with the next episode of Say Hello to My Little Film.